Hey, what's up? I'm Darkbblue, aiming to enable everyone to enjoy games in depth. In this video, I'll show you how to stack buffs in Elden Ring. There are many usable attacks in this game and they can all be made into buff stacking combat. Apparently, they need different buffs, so I don't think I should give you a standard answer. Instead, you will learn how to choose and apply buffs on your own. You can follow 3 basic steps to this goal. First, decide which attack to use, then select buff, and finally apply temporary buff. Don't neglect the importance of deciding which attack to use. You need to make sure the way of combat you choose is suitable for the boss you are fighting. For example, Scent of the Bud has relatively short window after her attacks. As a result, Warcry charge attack is too slow for this boss. Although I can clear half of her health with the first attack, it's hard to land more hits. In comparison, the flexibility of Light Greatsword jumping attack makes it pretty decent for this boss. Even with less buff and lower damage than the Warcry build, I managed to have succeeded many times. With this example, I wish to convey that trying to build a buff stacking combat strategy upon an unsuitable attack has the risk of wasting your time. As for how to find a suitable attack for a boss, I think it's more related to interactive combat. You can go into the boss fight without any buff and play around with different weapons and skills to find it out. Our next step is to select what buff to use. You can find a list of all kinds of buffs in the Factory Life wiki. Go to the buffs and debuffs page under the character category. I break buffs into 3 types, and the first to consider is persistent buffs. They mainly come from 3 sources: Talisman, some armors and weapons with special effects, and Great Runes. Talisman and Great Runes have their own pages, and you can find all armors and weapons with special effects from this link in the buffs and debuffs page. Just look up the table and grab what is suitable for the attack you decide to use. The next to consider is temporary buffs. One important source for temporary buffs is crystal tears fused into your physique. The other temporary buffs come from spells, skills, and sometimes items. Note that the temporary buffs from spells, skills, and items fall into certain categories, and only one buff from each category can be active at a time. Don't worry though, as the wiki has already organized the buffs according to their categories, so you only need to select one buff per list. By the way, most buffs and debuffs, including persistent and temporary ones, can stack freely. Only those from spells, skills, and items are usually restricted. Additionally, temporary debuffs can also be useful, such as Frostbite, which can increase damage taken. After persistent and temporary buffs, the final stop is exaltation buffs. There are a group of special buffs activated by different status effects in Vicinity. By in Vicinity, I mean the status effects on your own character can also activate these buffs. So a common technique is to proc status effects before the boss fight on your own character to activate all exaltation buffs for huge bonus. Bleeding can be procced with Seppuku, Poison with Perfume Bottle, Madness with Howl of Shabriri, Sleep with Lulling Branch. If you do so, the special feature of exaltation buffs will appear. On one hand, although the effects are given by some gears, you can safely unequip these gears after the buff is activated. So exaltation buffs can coexist with all the persistent and temporary buffs you've already selected. On the other, exaltation buffs have very strong bonus and a very short duration, like 20 seconds. Given the 2 features, exaltation buffs are usually used only when you are attempting for extremely high damage. Of course, you can also use exaltation buffs like how you use regular persistent buffs. For example, if your build can apply bleed to the boss, you can keep bleed exaltation gears equipped so they can be activated repeatedly during the fight. If used in this way, exaltation buffs will behave more similarly to persistent buffs because you need to have them equipped all the time. In conclusion, you have persistent, temporary, and exaltation buffs, comprising 3 categories. I don't always use all of them. In dungeon crawling, I usually only use persistent buffs. For regular boss fight, I use persistent and temporary buffs, and only when trying to finish the fight within seconds, I will use exaltation buffs. As we have finished selecting buffs, it's time to apply all the temporary and exaltation buffs. You need to first plan in what order to apply them. The basic rule is to apply buffs with longer duration before those with shorter duration, the reason for which is quite apparent. However, weapon buffs will be deactivated once the weapon is no longer held in your hand. This might bring some additional restriction. According to the buff order, I also advise you to reorganize your gears and inventory. Organize your equipped gears and spells such that they can be swapped smoothly, and put useless gears in a stash to make your inventory more compact, which will later allow you to swap gears faster. With the preparation done, you can also consider making a backup of your save file. In this way, you don't need to worry about the number of your consumables and reorganize your gears after each attempt. Now it's time to actually practice the buffs. Most time, you just need to swap your items, spells, and gears and apply all the buffs in order, which is pretty simple. What is not simple is when you need to open the menu and change gears. For instance, you may need to change White Mask to Mushroom Crown after triggering Bleed Exaltation. So here's my personal suggestion. You can call out the menu while your character is still busy. At present, the menu is gray, indicating you cannot swap gears right now. Wait patiently while also pressing your movement button to cancel some animation. Once you see the menu turn bright, immediately start swapping gears. When surfing through gears, I recommend using arrow buttons instead of mouse or stick to be more precise. You will also find it helpful if you have organized your inventory before. Sometimes you need to swap more than one gear, such as multiple exaltation talisman. You can do this without going back to the previous menu. Although there's no corresponding button hint for this function in this menu, it's actually the same button as shown here. You can thus confirm which button to press in your environment. Relatively, changing exaltation headpiece is very difficult, but changing exaltation talisman is easier because you can do it while entering the fog door. So if you are not very confident for now, maybe consider only changing the talisman. Thus far, we have covered the entire procedure for buff stacking combat. Before the video ends, let's see some examples. Now I want to fight the Sin of the Butt. Let's say I decide to use Warcry Charge Attack for this. I start with selecting buffs where persistent buffs come first. Talisman I use: two-handing, Charge Attack, Roll Attack, Successive Attack. I find that Highland Axe can buff Roll Attack, so I can put it in my offhand. There's no armor specially designed for Roll Attack, so I use the generic Rakshasa set. There's no special Great Rune either, so I use Godric's Great Rune. As for temporary buffs, I first choose Blood-Sucking tier and Charge Attack tier. Then I go through the buffs category list to select one buff per category, Standard as Aura and Exalted Flesh as Body. I also use Frostbite debuff in addition. At last, I need to select Exaltation buffs. Since this is a strength stacks character without enough faith for Howl of Chivalry, I give up Madness. I also give up Sleep because it's a bit complicated to trigger. So what I use is Bleed and Poison. Bleed Exaltation includes a talisman and a head armor. Poison Exaltation includes a talisman, a head armor, and a weapon. After organizing the gears and making a backup of my save file, I start to put this strategy into real fight. Naturally, I noticed that Warcry Charge Attack is too slow for Sin of the Butt. I also noticed that my Bleed Exaltation already goes off before I could land my first hit, because I need to wait for the boss to come close. Based on this observation, I changed to another strategy where I mainly use the jumping attack of Light Greatsword. My buff selection also changes accordingly, introducing more successive hit bonus. I also removed the bleed exaltation to make my buffs more compact. This time, I can beat the boss easily. The two previous examples show how I stack offensive buffs. It's also possible to stack defensive buffs using the same 3 steps, as shown by the 2 clicks now. One with a strength-based character and the other with an intelligence character. Follow the 3 steps and you will be able to craft your own buff stacking strategy. I hope this video can help you create your own possibility. If you want to join me into depths of games, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, see you around.